This is the story of how Robert McGee was scalped in the summer of 1864 by Sioux Indian warriors and lived to tell the tale. In 1864, 14-year-old Robert McGee and his family decided to migrate west to seek a better life on the American frontier. The family joined a wagon train heading to Leavenworth, Kansas. Sadly, somewhere along the trail, McGee's parents died and he became an orphan. Despite his parents' death, he eventually made it to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, where he began to look for work. With few options available to him, McGee applied to join the Army, but he was rejected because he was too young. Desperate for work, he took a job with a freight company to take supplies to Fort Union in New Mexico. In the summer of 1864, the freight company sent a wagon train to leave Fort Leavenworth bound for Fort Union, and McGee was assigned as one of the teamsters working on the wagon. Because of the many dangers on the trail, the wagon train was assigned a U.S. Army escort. This was a wise decision, for at the time it was not uncommon for travelers to be attacked by Indians. The caravan departed, and despite regular harassments from Indian parties, the wagon still managed to travel roughly 16 miles per day. On July 18th, exhausted from the heat, the wagon train made camp near Walnut Creek, not far from Fort Zara near present-day Great Bend, Kansas. With Fort Zara so close and diminishing skirmishes, the teamsters and their escort let their guard down, allowing more distance between the wagon train and the Army escort. When both parties stopped to camp for the day, they were about a mile apart. At about 5 in the afternoon, the camp was suddenly attacked by over 100 Sioux Indians allegedly under the command of Chief Little Turtle. The Indian warriors swooped in, relentlessly shooting arrows and firearms at the teamsters. The soldiers responsible for protecting the wagon train were too slow to respond, and consequently the attacking Sioux met little resistance. Within minutes, they had wounded or killed all of the teamsters, and only one would live to tell the tale: Robert McGee. McGee reports that he had suffered multiple arrow wounds and a pistol shot to the back. Immobilized by his wounds, he laid face down in the dirt when Chief Little Turtle approached him. McGee recalled that he was conscious when the Indian war leader cut off 64 square inches of scalp and hair from his head, starting just behind the ears. It is said that Sioux warriors took much larger pieces of scalp from the head than other tribes. When the soldiers finally caught up with the wagon train, they found a horrible massacre, with everyone scalped. But as the soldiers picked through the bodies, they found that McGee had survived. They were shocked to see the carnage, and even more shocked to see that McGee was still alive. He was rushed to Fort Larned, where the post surgeon treated his injuries. Amazingly, Robert recovered from his wounds, and he lived even though he no longer had a scalp. The press quickly dubbed McGee the man with 14 lives. McGee took advantage of his disfigurement to establish a career in public appearances. Eminent surgeons experimented on McGee, failing to restore any hair. The legend promoted the fiction that McGee was the only person to ever survive a scalping. McGee's survival was truly incredible, but he wasn't the only man to be scalped and live to tell about it. Josiah Wilbarger was set upon by Comanche Indians about 4 miles east of modern Austin, Texas. He was shot with arrows, scalped, and left for dead, but survived. Wilbarger is quoted as saying that being scalped was surprisingly painless, but, quote, while no pain was perceptible, the removal of his scalp sounded like ominous roar and peal of distant thunder, end quote. Another survivor was William Thompson. During an ambush, he was shot in the shoulder, and his scalp was carved off his skull. During the attack, Thompson fainted, but the summer heat stopped the bleeding. Curiously, the Native Americans left Thompson's scalp next to the knocked-out Englishman. After he came to, he picked it up and went back to Omaha, where he asked Dr. Richard Moore to reattach it to his skull. Unable to get his scalp fixed back onto his head, Thompson did the next best thing. He went back to England and put his scalp on display for money.